Nafshi Yeshoveg Yancheni B'Maglei Tzedek L'Ma'an Shemo. Gam Kiech Megeit Samav Asli Ira Ki Ata Imodi Shiftecho Mishantecha Heima Yinachemuni. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of justice for his name's sake. Although I walk in the valley overshadowed by death, I fear no evil, because I know you are with me. Your rod and your staff together both serve to comfort me. Tarach lefanei shulchan neged soroi, dishanta b'shem and roshi kosi v'vaya. Prepare a table before me, in full view of my tormentors. You anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Ach tov v'chesed yidufuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veis Adonai la'orech yamin. May goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, that I'll be able to dwell in the house of the Almighty for an eternity of days. Together take final leave. Natalie Rothenberg, Elka Bas Mordechai. You mentioned it's always difficult to give somewhat of a eulogy to somebody you didn't know. But I had the opportunity of knowing Mrs. Rothenberg, Natalie, for quite a few years. Our relationship with the family goes back, I got close to 30 years. I had the opportunity of knowing the Rothenbergs as part of that family. It's a beautiful, close-knit family for a good part of that time. Natalie was born in Cleveland 99 years ago. Talking with Mary and Kyrie yesterday. That in itself is something which is not too many people can say that. But to the extent that a mother is also American born too, for that matter, that in itself is something that's quite remarkable. Natalie grew up as an only child to her parents, and perhaps that may have explained part of her nature. She was such a person that appreciated and enjoyed family so much. Family was so important to her. And friends for that matter also. It struck me King Solomon's famous praise of the Jewish woman, Eshes Chayil, the woman of valor who can find her values far beyond the value of pearls. A good part of the poem, which is recited Friday night at many a Shabbos table, Botak Bolei Bala V'Shol Lo Yachzar, how her husband had full confidence and trust in her, and how her selflessness for her family, for her children. It struck me, although there are other parts of it also. This woman seems to have been the Eshes Chayil, a woman of commerce too. But nevertheless, the focus of her life seemed to have been her children, her family. And that seemed to be such a perfect description of Natalie. And perhaps again, might have been part of the fact growing up without any siblings herself. But how much of an emphasis and focus she placed in her family. The pride she had in her husband, David, it was so evident. Even in seeing them, visiting them at Myers. And it was amazing how David was the life of the party in Myers to some extent. He was in charge of different types of activities, somewhat of a freelance comedian a little bit, and something that was appreciated by many of the residents over there. And she showed such nachash, such pride she had. She was content to stay in the background. She had no interest in being up front with her husband, but just the adoration and that pride that she had in her husband was so beautiful to see. And then her children, she couldn't stop talking about her two children. My son the doctor and my son the lawyer. And that's something which is Larry and Ralph. And that's something again that she would tell me sometimes, I have such wonderful children. My children are so, and they just go on. And she would have the pride at some of their accomplishments hanging in her apartment. And then the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. And again, there was such pride over there. It meant so much. She relatively simple type of a person. Wasn't a college-educated person. But nevertheless, though, there was selflessness. And she served as a secretary for quite a few different, several different places, organizations in Cleveland. But the primary focus was her family. It was so important to her. They told me how it oftentimes mentioned about the importance of keeping the family together, that closeness in the family. And several years ago, great aunt passed away. And the cousins were able to get together, and it was something that she cherished. Just being able to sit by, able to see the children and nieces and nephews just be together. And often that's not the type of thing, perhaps, that gets written up, or that wins a person accolades. But ultimately, no, that's the most important thing. Take a look around over here. All the stones over here in a place in a cemetery like this. And a few words, perhaps, of inscription describing the essence of how a person wants to be remembered. And you don't find anything, people don't talk about their professions. They don't talk about their physical prowess. They don't talk about their financial status. It's beloved, mother, grandmother, wife, son, etc. Ultimately, those are the things that are most important to us. And ultimately, those are the things that we leave our impact and our imprint on, perhaps more than anything else. Instilling values into our families, instilling values into our children, and ultimately to our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And again, it meant so much to her. And you can tell that by the way she would talk about. I mentioned how she was such a gusher when she would talk about the different accomplishments. If it was a matter, I just mentioned yesterday, I remember I was talking about my great-grandson, Victor, seeing him dance, and it was so beautiful, and he's so wonderful. And speaking about Sarah, and about just their abilities of their parenting abilities, and how wonderful parents they are, and how much that emphasis they put and focus into their children. It was that was the most important thing in the world to her. And ultimately, if you think about it, that really is the most important thing. Oftentimes, personally, hear talk about people trying to improve the world. Tikkun olam, how we can do to be able to improve the world, to make the world a better world. Certainly, people may sometimes try to write letters to senators or try to get involved in organizations. But there's no doubt that the greatest accomplishment, the most we can do for the world, begins in our own little circle, in our own families. There was once a great rabbi of the Divrei Chaim, Reb Chaim of Sanz. He used to say, when I first became a rabbi, I was determined to make a difference in the world, change the world. As I got a little bit older, I realized that may be too idealistic, maybe beyond the scope of my capabilities. So at least I'm going to make an impact on my city. I'm going to change my city. I'm going to prove my city is going to be tops. And as I got a little older, I realized that might be also a little bit outside of my capabilities. At least I'm going to have the impact on my family. Now I'm already an old man, he said. And I realize now the only really emphasis and accomplishment I can do is in myself, bring about change. But then I noticed an interesting thing. When I worked on improving myself, I saw the spillover effect to my family, and it affected my family too. And I realized that when they changed, ultimately their spillover effect affected the city too. And then I came to the realization that's how I improved the world. That's we can all make an impact in the world itself. I think that was Natalie. Quiet woman, so happy with what she had. Really just always a happy person, always a smile on her face. I don't really know a whole lot about her past necessarily, challenges she might have had. But you could never tell. There was a smile, a perpetual smile. Even the last couple of months when she wasn't that well. Sometimes she really wasn't totally cognizant for that matter. But there was that smile was always there. Like I said, there was a certain playfulness, so to say. That remained even till the end, till the night before she passed. Harris said she was holding her hand and she was like playing with her fingers a little bit. That remained until the very end. And the understanding that the impact that she left over to her family, that a person can be happy, like The rabbis tell us, Ezu Asher Samech Bechelko, the wealthiest, richest, happiest person in the world is the person that's happy with what he has. Don't need much more. She was perfectly satisfied. And she was the kind of person that people appreciated, people liked her because of that. She was a person that had a lot of good friends. Good friends are hard to come by. She was good friends in an organization of Holocaust survivors. She wasn't a Holocaust survivor, neither was her husband. But they took to her. She was an adopted survivor, as it were. When they went on a trip once, on a cruise, I believe, a cruise, and there was, on the cruise also was the General Counsel of Malta and his wife. You would imagine somebody like that, people would try to cozy up to somebody important. They'd be taking selfies with the person, things like that. But that wasn't what happened over here. It was the General Counsel that was cozying up to the Rothenbergs. They became friends with even afterwards. They still have right now letters from the station of the General Counsel of Malta. That was the kind of person that was a pleasant person to be around. The person that was, as Mishnah Pirkei Avos talks about, have Mikabos called Adam Sever Panim Yafos, the importance of greeting everybody with a friendly disposition. That friendly disposition was there as long as I knew her, till the very last day. Even again, I met her when I went to visit her several weeks ago in the nursing home. She didn't recognize me, and she was falling asleep pretty much. When I caught eyes with her, there was a smile on her face, though. That stayed. I think that ultimately is a legacy that she left to her family, left over to her friends. I think it's a legacy that's so important, a legacy that really can't be spoken about enough, about the importance of simple things in life, perhaps, the value and how important those simple things in life are. She lived a full life, 99-year life, a life of joy, a life of happiness, a life that she passed that happiness down to her children. But obviously, a mother is always a mother. It's always difficult taking leave of a parent, no matter, regardless of the age. But I think she leaves her a legacy to her family, leaves her a legacy to her friends that will make her remembered, and the ideals that she represented to be remembered for a good long time to come. May I remember to be bound to the eternal bond of life. The Almighty move and wipe away the tears from all those that are not here. Natalie is survived by her sons, Dr. Ralph and Fran Rothenberg, son Larry Kai Rothenberg, granddaughters Sarah and Elizabeth, grandsons Baruch, Chaim, and Craig, and families, and 12 great-grandchildren. Say something else? You saying something? Yeah. You want to say something? Somewhere we'd like to say a few words.
Rabbi Nissenbaum was right. My mother excelled in the ability to express love and the capacity for nachas, for her children, her grandchildren, her great-children. No one could out-excel my mother. She was an only child, so she was close with her family. She was a child of the Depression, and she could make do with what she had. She never had any desire for any luxuries. I was impressed when she was in her mid-90s and she started on the path of dementia, and she realized it. And at the first realization that she was heading down that path, she started to plan ahead. She made sure that I knew where the keys were, where the bank account was, where the valuables were. She even asked Rabbi Nissenbaum if he would officiate, and this was years ago already. She around the beginning of this year, she went into pretty deep dementia. She didn't weigh much to start with, but she weighed 78 pounds. That was at the beginning of the year. In June, she fell. She fractured a vertebrae, and at the beginning of July, she was out of the hospital in Montefiore, bedridden. She stopped eating and drinking, and I had heard that if you don't drink water for 3 days, you can't survive. She went probably a week and a half or two with no water and no food, other than maybe wiping off her lips or something like that. She lost her ability to swallow, it seemed. She became non-responsive, and I looked at her, and in my opinion, she had about a day or two to go. This was maybe the second week of July. We took her to the hospital, and some people would say at that point, there's no quality of life. 99 years old, deep dementia, pain, non-responsive, and she was admitted to the oncology wing at the hospital. I guess maybe that was the only place there was an available bed. She didn't have cancer, but that's where she ended up. And that's where I learned from her maybe the most powerful lesson. Be'ezras Hashem, events were orchestrated for me to see some things that really made this powerful lesson. With the help of intravenous fluids, she became conscious again, at least to some extent. I could walk in the room and she opened her eyes and saw it was me. She recognized me. I would hold her hand and she could squeeze my hand, and sometimes playfully with the hand. I showed her pictures of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and she was able to smile. To me, that's quality, not lack of quality. She had roommates, one after another, in the oncology wing, people hospitalized with cancer, I suppose. The first one was about a 20-year-old woman. And one day I walked in, and I saw my mother laying there, and under her arm was a teddy bear. Where'd the teddy bear come from? The mother of the roommate who had cancer had the Rachmonis and showed the Chesed to get a teddy bear for my mother, who wouldn't know her, wouldn't even know it was a teddy bear for that matter, and yet that's what she did. I was able to see the altruism of the nurses there and the aides as they took care of my mother. I would tell my friends, they would ask, how's your mother? I would tell them, she was in pretty bad shape, and they showed empathy. Some of them said, is there anything I can do? Let me know. Some of them said, Refuah Shlema. And then there were the ones who said, what is her Hebrew name? So that they could add her to their daily prayers. So here's a question. Can a 90-year-old woman, deep in dementia, in great pain, almost non-responsive, accomplish anything? Rabbi Nissimam talked about tikkun olam. Can a person in that position make the world a better place? Yes. She accomplished bringing other people to show chesed, to put more chesed into the world, to show empathy for other people, to increase their prayer. And she leaves me and us with this lesson in the month of Elul, before Rosh Hashanah. The lesson is, can we all increase our own chesed and empathy for other people and strengthen our prayers? I once heard a tape from Rabbi Yisachar Frand talking about the quality of life at the end of life. And he ended by saying, not quality of life, sanctity of life. I want to finish with a story that happened exactly a year ago. My mother had a heart attack. She was 98 years old at that time. She had a heart attack. She was in the hospital. And my brother Ralph and I went the next day, and she was sound asleep the entire day. The doctor said she was being treated with medication. So I went back the next day. I walked in, and here she is, sitting in a chair, happy, smiling, relaxed, talkative, cheerful. It was incredible. I don't know what that medication was, but I think I want some. I walked in, and she looked at me, and she had this outburst. You came. I love you. I love you so much. I love you. Now, so I took that in. I said, all right, Mom. Very nice. So she's talking to me, and she said, she was 98 years old at that time. She said, one of the nurses told her that she was 88 years old. Am I 88 years old? Well, she was 98 years old. I think I could be forgiven for saying, yeah, Mom, 88. And she thought for a minute, and she said, how old are you? And I said, 68. And she got this confused look for a second. She said, what kind of match is that? So I realized she thought I was my father. I had heard that this happens sometimes with people in dementia. They think that their child is their spouse, who they remember looking like something like that back in when they knew. And so I had from that the privilege of bringing my father back to life in her eyes. And her outburst of I love you, was so deep and so pure. And I imagine my father's neshama is out there saying, all right, Natalie, may their neshamas be together in Gan Eden.
Say the Kel Malay Memorial Prayer. El Malay Rachamim Shochim Bamiromim Hamitseminu Chanechona Kanfei Shechina B'Malok Toshim Teorim Kizora Kemasirim Et Ishmad El Kadbat Mordechai Shalach Olama Ba'avor Shenod Bim Stakabar Eskrad Nishmata B'Gan Eden Seim Nuchata Lachim Balarachmim Yastira B'Seiter Knafav Yolamim Yitzur B'Tzurachim Nishmata Adonai Hunachlata V'Tanuach Mishkava V'Shalom V'Omar Amen. O God, full of mercy, who dwells on high, grant proper rest on the wings of the divine presence and lofty levels of the holy and the pure ones, who shine like the glow of the firmament, for the soul of Natalie Rothenberg, who went on to her world because people are contributing charity in remembrance of her soul. May her resting place be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the Master of Mercy shelter her in the shelter of his wings for eternity, and may he bind her soul in the bond of life. Hashem is her heritage, and may she repose in peace on her resting place. Now let us respond. Amen.
Not yet.
time, we invite anyone who wishes to help in the mitzvah of Hesed Shalameth, placing earth upon the grave. You may step forward. You take it right off from the board, sir. Thank you.
these guys. Gadal v'kadash me'rabah. Balmad akud atid la'adatata. Lahaye mataya. L'asaka lahaye alma. Umibnei karta Jerusalem. Ushlachta shachlal hayachala bagava. Me'akar pulchana nochra'a me'ar'a Pul atava, pul chava, dishmaya, atara, v'yimlo kuchim barich hu, b'machute v'yakare, v'chayachon v'yimachon of chayed hope it Israel, bagalas matri v'mru amen. Shmei ravarach le'elam alamei lamaya, it barach v'yistabach v'yitbar v'yitmaram v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudisha barich hu. Leilamin kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran b'lama v'yimru amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'murmav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
I'm going to ask people to form an aisle here on each side of one another to allow the family to pass through. Show your support to them.
Do you stand here?
No, your grandchildren.
Oh, okay.
This concludes our service. Thank you for attending on behalf of the family.